Hi artists, today we're going to talk about hand sewing, and I'm here in our fiber studio in the art room, and I want to tell you a little bit about hand sewing before I show you. Hand sewing is different than embroidery, so this is an example of embroidery that one of your classmates has done. Lauren Shatner did this. Embroidery is for decoration. It's used to embellish something, to make it more beautiful. Hand sewing, on the other hand, is used to connect two pieces of fabric. So a really great example is what some of you might have seen people make. For example, a small pillow. This is an example of what a pillow might end up looking like before it's been stuffed. The stitches here are literally holding two pieces of fabric together. If I pull, they don't come apart. And this will get turned inside out, stuffed, and made into a small pillow. Another thing that hand sewing can be used for, if you're making things, if you're taking fabric and connecting it to other pieces of fabric, you could end up with something like this. This is the beginning of a very old art form called quilting, quilt making. If you look on the back, you can see that I've hand sewed these 9 pieces of fabric together so they won't come apart. So hand sewing to hold fabric together, embroidery to make something more decorative or embellished. All right, let's talk about how to do it. Okay, I have prepared my materials. You can see that I have threaded my needle, and at the end of my thread, I have a nice fat knot that will prevent my thread from coming through the fabric. And you'll also notice that where my thread is doubled over on itself, I have not sewn it, or not tied the thread to the needle. Do not tie your thread to the needle. It will be too hard to go through the fabric. The first example of a stitch I'm going to show you is the running stitch. This is what a running stitch looks like here. You'll notice we want to strive for small stitches. Small stitches end up being very strong when they're pulled apart. You'll see when I pull here, my fabric pieces stay together. If you do running stitches that are very large, they're not nearly as strong. So if I were to try to make a pillow and make the stitches this big, you see what happens when it gets pulled a little bit, the stuffing starts to come out and your pillow doesn't stay together, or whatever else it is that you're making. So, in order to make a running stitch, I first pull my needle through, and then I begin pushing my needle in and out of both pieces of fabric. A running stitch is the way most clothing was made before the sewing machine. That's because it was easy to do quickly. You see how I can get 3 or 4 or 5 stitches with my needle just in one go before I pull it through. Now these stitches don't look super even. You want to strive to make them as even as possible and just move as steadily as you can. And by doing it this way with a sewing needle and making several stitches in one pull, the running stitch can go very quickly and efficiently. Now I will mention I have been doing hand sewing since I was your age. I learned I suppose when I was in middle school. It takes a bit of practice, but with patience and persistence, anyone can learn how to do this and to do it well, to do it straight. You see this example here, they're straight, and my stitches are small. Now I've reached the end of this running stitch area. Now that I've finished, this is really important, I'm going to make a small stitch, and I have a loop of thread here. I'm going to take my needle, go through the loop. It's going to create a small knot in the fabric. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to take my needle through the loop, which got caught a little bit. This all happens sometimes. I have my knot now. Pull out that strand. And now my stitches will not come out because I've tied them off, I've knotted them off. And now I just cut with my scissors, and that seam is done. That's the running stitch. I have one more stitch that I'm going to show you. Okay, we're back. This is the running stitch that I created just now. And here I'm going to do a stitch for you called whip stitch. I have threaded my needle, as you can see. I have put a knot at the end of the thread so that it will not go through the fabric. And again, I have not tied my thread onto my needle, otherwise it will not go through. With a whip stitch, I pull the needle through and the thread, and I just start tucking my needle over the side and pulling it through. So this kind of goes over the edge. I move down the row as I go. So I'm going to the back of the fabric, pushing through the front of the fabric, making sure my stitches line up, and then just pushing through the back and pulling. I'm not pushing my needle through the front of the fabric. I'm literally creating, it's almost like a spiral notebook, like making a little spiral stitch. So if you're interested in hand sewing, I want to see you create both of these stitches. Just show me that you've practiced both stitches. You're going to recreate what you see here. Two pieces of fabric sewn together on one side with the whip stitch, and along the other side, the running stitch. Once you have practiced that and you show me that you can do it, you are ready to make a hand sewing project of your choice. I'm going to continue to the end of the seam to show you again how to tie this thread so it will not come undone. This has gotten caught. Come on, there we go. We want it to get nice and straight. Oh well. For the sake of the video, we're just gonna keep going. Two more stitches, and we can tie off. Oops. Okay. Now I know I'm done. I'm literally gonna take my needle, tuck it through both pieces of fabric. You can see on the back that I've gone through. Again, I have a loop here, and I'm gonna tuck my needle through, and this will pull a knot to the front. I do it one more time, push my needle through, take my needle through the loop, gently pull through, and I have a nice tight knot. When I cut the excess off here, I know that this will not come out. I can adjust my stitches a little, but this is the idea here, that a whip stitch just goes around and around and around the edge of the stitch. So again, you show me this, that you've practiced the running stitch and the whip stitch, and you are ready to do some hand sewing. I look forward to seeing what you have to create. Remember, I have the needles up in my desk. They're so small that I hold on to them so that they don't get lost. This is a sewing needle, much smaller than an embroidery needle. So the thread and fabric are in our fiber studio, and the needles are with me. All right.